Hello and welcome to the Datsun podcast, where we talk about the biggest tech, automotive, and gaming news for the week and take a deeper dive. I'm Govind.
And I'm Suhail. We started this podcast to bring a more nuanced and cynical take on technology news and trends. Thanks to everyone who took the time out to listen to our podcast and those who've subscribed and left feedback as well. Do continue to send us your feedback.
Datsun is now available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Podcast. So whatever your choice of platforms, we're available and we hope you keep listening to these.
And before we get to the topics of the day, if you like our content and want to hear more of our tech rants, hit the subscribe button below to show us your support. In technology, Netflix is reckoning with a loss of subscribers and a dip in their stock price as a result. There's a blockchain heist that took only 13 seconds to complete. And do you want to play video games on a high-def display? What resolution do you need? And what do you invest in? A console or a gaming PC?
In automotive news, more EV news and a rough start for even more EV scooter companies in India. Tesla is planning to emulate Apple in more ways than one.
And finally, what do NFTs have to do with gaming? Join us for episode 4 of this podcast as we talk about these news stories and more. Okay, so we'll start with the tech news articles of the week as we do. In our first episode, we actually talked about Netflix planning to crack down on password sharing. But the big news that came out last week was that Netflix reported a loss of approximately 200,000 subscribers for the first time since they started large-scale streaming. And as a result, their stock tanked quite heavily. And there's been a lot of news articles coming about speculating what the future of Netflix might be. So, we already talked about this in episode 1, which is, obviously we were talking about the differences between Netflix, 8 to 10 years ago versus Netflix now in different markets. But now it looks like the writing is really on the wall. Do you have any comments, Govind?
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of inevitable, right? So I'll tell you what's different about what used to happen over what's happening right now. What's happening right now is an abundance of OTT platforms who are offering different varieties of shows to the consumer, and with that comes obviously the choice that the customer has to decide between, do I want to continue with subscribing to one service or another? And I
Yep.
think what people are generally tending to do are subscribing to stuff that they want to see for that month, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
might decide to see one series at a time or
Mm-hmm.
two series at a time, and then they'd have subscriptions for those platforms that offer those series.
Yep.
And then after they're done with that, they'll cancel it and then move on to the next. So what Netflix has really lost out on is that annual subscriber base, I think,
Correct.
is I mean, that continuity or the guaranteed income stream
Mm.
is questionable right now for Netflix. I think they're doing some stuff right. So based on that, like they've started. For India, they've done this for a while. They've had different kind of pricing streams,
Yep.
and they have a mobile only, very affordable
Yes.
option.
It's one of the few
And
markets where they do that is India, I believe. Yeah.
exactly, it's
Mm-hmm.
surprisingly affordable, right? So,
Yeah.
and if you go to see the mobile penetration, we talked about this earlier as well. Mobile penetration in India is huge, right? So you
Oh,
see
absolutely.
everybody, like different classes of people,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in different positions in society. Everybody's watching stuff on their phones, right? So be it
Mm.
YouTube, be it any other streaming platform. So Netflix, um, they definitely succeeded there in going the same route in India,
Yep.
because that was what the market required them to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're looking at a different opportunity in the US as well, right? So I think
Yeah.
one of the articles that came out was regarding ads supported
Yeah.
plans.
Before I talk about that, I just wanted to kind of show for the folks who are on the video version of the podcast, just kind of what the
Yeah,
breakdown of the different OTT platforms in India looks like. And the lion's share of the market is occupied by Disney plus Hotstar because of their extensive content catalog, right? Especially
yeah,
India specific. They cover the major sporting event, which is basically IPL cricket, and they
yeah,
have a lion's share of the big soap opera dramas in different languages, from Hindi to Malayalam, Telugu, etc. Um,
Yeah.
One thing that's really interesting that I've kind of noticed is that if you're in India, a lot of these alternate sort of India specific platforms tend to have agreements with major cell phone providers to include a a service option as part of, like, one of the cell phone plans. And
Yes.
have you seen Netflix doing that, or are they just trying to ride that out by themselves?
There are, but it's more popular with Hotstar or
Yeah,
Disney Hotstar,
yeah, I've
and
seen that.
also
Yeah.
with Prime.
Yes.
Prime is also one, but Prime, when they market that as an additional benefit of a cell phone plan, they
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
usually market it as Prime as a whole, including the shipping,
Yep.
free shipping and all of that stuff. So that's like a package deal. So if you
Yeah.
look at just OTTs, it's usually Hotstar or some of the
Mm-hmm.
even not so popular OTT streaming platforms like
Yep.
Z5 or whatever else, right? So um,
Voot
Netflix,
and
not
yeah,
yeah,
all of
Vote,
those.
exactly,
Yeah.
Vote
Yeah.
Media and
Yeah.
all of that stuff, right? So um, Netflix not so much in that space, but Netflix does get tied in with some of the ISPs
Yep.
in terms of their broadband or fiber plans.
I see.
But
That's
again,
interesting. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
limited
Yeah.
comparatively to your mobile plans. It's Netflix is on more on the ISP side, at least what I've seen.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, right? I think it's the other platforms that offer much more sort of like India specific or regional language specific content that is, has a broader reach compared to
Yeah,
Netflix, which is, as far as I know, I mean, even the English language content on Netflix is starting to dwindle now. And it's, as far as I can understand it, in India, Netflix is like a K drama streaming network in
it
some sense,
is.
right? Yeah.
It is very
Yeah.
popular
Yeah.
for Korean dramas
Yep.
to be pushed to users as because this is a significantly big content selection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, Indian specific content is very limited on
On
Netflix,
Netflix, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For series, like 100%, it's
Yeah.
not there. It doesn't exist. Like it does in some sense in some
Yeah.
crime dramas and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
it's nowhere as close to having original content like Hotstar does,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah. Hotstar, even Amazon has poured in a lot of money in terms of acquiring special
Yeah,
rights for a lot of, like, movies and series that they exclusively show on Prime Video. I just wanted to
yeah,
contrast that with the situation in the US, where the as of Q3 2021, Netflix's market share was still dominant. It was 27% of the total market share. In India, it's about 7 or 9% for India, but
mm,
it's being closely chased by Prime Video and increasingly HBO Max and Disney Plus and Hulu. Um, so the US scenario is quite interesting because if you take a few years back, that pie chart had only a single color on it, and that was Netflix, right? So nobody else really had a streaming platform to speak of. Amazon
yeah.
followed closely with Prime Video. So the interesting thing that I also wanted to bring attention to was that. In the US, at least, I'm not sure about India. Prime is part of the Prime package, right? It's not just the video. Very few people, as far as I know, I mean, like, the Amazon obviously knows this, and market strategists would be able to tell you what's the percentage of people who buy Amazon Prime specifically for Prime Video. But I believe most of it are in the US are getting it for the shipping. Is there a video only tier in India?
There isn't. No, it's
Okay,
the same
okay,
way. So
okay,
if
it's
you
the same.
subscribe to Prime, you get everything. You
Okay.
get your Amazon Music, you get Prime
Hmm.
Video, and the shipping.
Yeah.
That's
So,
Audible
so
separate, but everything Amazon Prime related is
yeah.
together.
So the signals coming from Netflix, in terms of the news articles and sort of the reporting, seem to be showing a scenario where Netflix is kind of looking at real, sort of stra- uh, crazy, not crazy, but like tough strategies to kind of mitigate their quote unquote downturn, right? So they are doing things that were previously, they're considering doing things that were previously unthinkable when it came to Netflix.
Yeah,
So they
yeah,
they definitely lost a lot of their content library of third party content, right? Like in the sense that, all of these the content that's on Netflix is basically being leased out to streaming platforms on shorter and shorter term leases now. Netflix in the US no
Mm.
longer shows Friends, but they do have Seinfeld, which was previously on Hulu, and so there's a lot of back and forth that way. But Netflix is starting to lose a lot of that kind of third party content, and you're starting to increasingly have to look to other platforms to be able to see, a particular movie that you want to watch. It used to be the fact that, you just look on Netflix. If it's on Netflix streaming, you got it. Otherwise, worst case, you could always get it mailed to you on DVD if you're willing to wait like 2 days to watch it.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago, but that's obviously not the case anymore. So
Yeah, I think for Friends and some of the other legacy
yeah,
shows that are part of libraries, like they still show Friends and Seinfeld here. So
yeah,
obviously they've got the royalties for that here for India for a while longer.
yeah,
Um, but like you said, because of the distribution of all the different OTT platforms right now,
yeah,
licensing has been kind of spread across everybody, right?
yep.
So now it's more like a bidding war of who wants to get which.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. And in the US especially, what's happening is increasingly the original studios and traditional broadcast networks are are launching their own streaming platforms. And
yeah,
of
and
course, there
all,
was the big news of CNN trying to launch CNN Plus.
yeah, and
Spent
then closing it right away.
spent an obscene amount of money. Govind, you might have to look this up exactly how much money that
I
was.
think it was 3 or 30 million. 3 or 30. I think 30 million
I don't know if 30 million was enough. They went all out and then they
or three
shut.
hundred million.
Yeah, and they shut down the platform in 3 weeks because they only got 20,000 subscribers.
It was 300 million.
Whew.
Three.
Yeah.
Wow, talk about waste.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the other sort of like focal point at this. Both these news articles hit this week. So we are definitely at this inflection point of Netflix being the streaming content king, people starting to question that. Netflix
Yeah.
losing subscribers, and the tough actions that Netflix are considering will probably end up with them losing even more subscribers, maybe, right? So if they go to an
Well,
ad
yeah.
supported tier, like that's one of the things that a lot of people, especially in the US market, right? So recurring payments in the US are pretty easy to do in
Mm.
the sense that they don't have the kind of regulations that the RBI now requires for standing instructions for payments.
Yeah.
And by default in the US, like your bank doesn't necessarily automatically SMS you when a transaction happens. You have to opt into those things. Whereas in India, those things
Yeah.
are by default. People keep close eyes on their credit card bills and their spends and things like that. So
Yeah.
there's in the US, the hook is get somebody to somehow just click I agree to a recurring payment, and then you've kind of got them in the sense that
Yeah.
people are not careful enough, or they don't really pay enough attention to their monthly bills, that
Mm.
they don't pay enough attention in general. But if there is a Netflix price increase, and if there's a lot of news and media hoopla about that, then a lot of people are going to start looking back and say, do I really need this? Like, I'm not even
Yeah.
watching anything else on Netflix.
I think a lot of it also relates back in with how difficult it is to cancel out of a plan, right? How accessible it is. It's usually
Oh,
hidden behind some kind of
yeah,
menu.
it's true.
I
And
mean, straightforward, yes, but for most of the time, it's straightforward, right? So if you want to purposefully do that as an action for the day, you'll go find it and you'll be able to do it. But it's not something
yeah,
that comes up right away, right? So if we want
yeah,
to look at, like, let's say I want to cancel my Prime membership on Amazon, I
yeah.
have to go to. It's not nowhere on the homepage. It's not very clear on the count settings either.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to go within a page, at least there's like
Yep.
4 or 5 clicks before you
Yeah.
can do that. So
Yeah.
it's kind of works in conjunction with that whole concept of if you've agreed for a recurring payment and just signed up, the
Mm-hmm.
likelihood of you not canceling it before you realize is very low, right? So um, you're gonna stick with it for a few months before you realize, oh, I really have
Yeah.
to get to this now.
There was a user
And
on
false charging, right?
yeah, false
Yeah.
charging, yeah, for sure. Although those are easier to do a chargeback in the US, but that's still
Yeah.
customer effort to do that. This is a post from Reddit. I think this is from r slash a whole design that talked about a person that left Netflix, and then Netflix just been constantly spamming that user for saying, hey, oh man, you need to come back. Oh, there's these new shows. Oh, listen, we can offer you a lower rate. So this stuff starting to seem increasingly desperate with like with the directions that Netflix has left to them. But honestly, yeah, that's the thing. What happens is whenever Netflix is on the news about like a price increase, then that's usually when people kind of think about it and they say, hey, wait a second, when's the last time I watched a series on Netflix? If you're in India and
Yeah.
if you consume a lot of like English language stuff in India, Netflix is amazing. Like there's a lot of like Paramount Plus shows, a lot of Disney Plus, not necessarily Disney Plus, but a lot of like Star Trek Picard, for example, or stuff that shows up on HBO Max here in the US that's available in India. But those things are like fewer and far between in the US now. Anyway,
So I
yeah.
think between Netflix and Hotstar, I think they have covered a lot. Hotstar as well has a lot of HBO content. There's a
Interesting.
whole section dedicated to
Yeah.
just HBO stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think between the two platforms, if you have both of them, you're covered. And if you
Yeah.
have Prime for shipping, you might as well throw that in for
For Amazon
additional
Prime.
bonus.
Yeah. There were
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
of other talking points about this. I'll probably just mention them real quickly. One was also apparently Netflix has this thing. I mean, a lot of other streaming platforms may do this, where they kind of greenlight a show, it becomes popular, and then they just leave it hanging. And then they build like a fan base for a particular show, and then it didn't meet their sort of like internal target numbers. Then they just leave the users hanging. So I read a couple of commentaries from people of like, people are just tired of being dumped on like that.
Mm.
And especially with Netflix, because they really went in deep with the original content sort of stuff, right? So
Well, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, initially they had, I mean, that was the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was excited to see original content from Netflix because it was
Yep.
extremely high production value in comparison with anything else that
At
was
least
being done.
initially, yeah.
Initially, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, that isn't the case. Right now, I think Netflix is too focused on inclusion and diversity. So the whole DEI thing is happening, and
Mm,
I think in that kind of sense,
yep.
the standards have kind of lowered themselves for Netflix in terms of what is accepted and what isn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
It's
debatable, but
debatable.
there is a lot more. There is a lot more content out there that's very focused on making sure that's happening.
Yep. Yeah.
I think,
And
but that's a general sense in most of the US based
yep.
content nowadays.
Yeah.
It's very focused on that. A
What?
classic example of that is this isn't Netflix, but How I Met Your Mother. That was a
Yeah.
very good sitcom. Have you
At least
checked out How I Met
initially.
Your Father?
No.
Well, yeah, don't, because it's just bad.
I mean, in general, all of these nostalgia reboots are kind of like that, right? They're just kind of like cash grabs and like, people trying to say, hey, people, seem to like this before. So let's kind of tap into that nostalgia since people just
Yeah.
want to be reminded of old times. How I Met Your Father seems to be extremely recent nostalgia compared to like, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and like things like that, right? So, but yeah, or it's just me getting older, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah,
The,
it isn't recent. It's just us getting older.
the other thing that I also want to mention is that this whole scenario smells like history repeating itself when it came to like cable TV in the US. So for context, folks who are not aware of what the scenario in the US was, for the longest time you could only get TV over the air, and there were three major over the air networks. It was NBC, CBS, and ABC. Over the air content can't be there's no gatekeeping in over the air content, right? Like anybody with an antenna can tune in and watch. So they were all supported by ads, but naturally, and that was kind of the social contract that people understood, that we're watching free TV, so it has to pay for, something's got to pay for it. It's ads. Then cable TV became a thing in the maybe the late 70s 80s here in the US, because it came pretty early here in the US, and cable TV's whole shtick was all the content you want, pay a subscription, no ads. HBO
Right.
were the big folks that kind of pioneered that whole idea. Is like, wow, you can actually watch movies at home and there are no ads and there's no breaks. But then eventually, ad creep happened, ads started coming in. So now it's like, the consumers got stuck with the worst of both worlds, right? They're paying for a subscription and they're watching ads. That's exactly what's happening with
Yeah.
streaming now. It's like, ooh,
I
check out
think
the streaming service. No ads. Ooh. And then, like
yeah,
Hulu pioneered this, right? Like Hulu had
true. A free version.
Hulu had a free version supported by ads, right? Hulu doesn't have that anymore. Hulu has a base
Okay, so I got to
tier.
pay for the ads as well.
You have
Yeah.
to pay for the base tier with ads on Hulu.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think that ad creep that you mentioned is
yeah,
also relevant in the same space. Like, so if you look at it, if I'm trying to watch something on Hotstar, they don't have ads right now on
yeah.
the regular content. But if it's
Mm-hmm.
live or if it's like being released that day or something like
Yeah,
that,
oh,
or
yeah, for
it's
sure.
premiering that day, there's ads. But
Yeah,
again, they're still focused a lot more on the pushing their own agenda
yep.
kind of ads. Like they're just promoting
Yeah,
their
yeah.
other
Their own
shows.
content. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which a
Yeah,
lot of
but
streaming services do.
that
Yeah.
but again, that's really ads, right?
Yeah,
You're
it is. Yeah.
moving, yeah. I mean, that's moving the audience away from what they're trying to watch to something else that
True.
they might want
True.
to watch. Yeah.
Also, I mean, like, not to spend too much time on this specific topic, but like, there's a reason cricket's so lucrative, right? There's so much space in between each over and each wicket for ads, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like a game like football, where the things have to be continuous for until halftime, right? Or because you can't really cut out of the action from football, but cricket's made for television ads, man. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
You get 5 days of ads and test.
literally, yeah. So the next topic that I wanted to talk about, this is going to be probably a regular segment on the show, which is this week's Web3/blockchain bashing by Suhail, mostly Suhail, and a little bit from Govind. So Web3, blockchain, decentralized finance, all of that jazz seems to have all the right headlines back in India, but all the wrong headlines back here in the US. So there was huge news among crypto circles about a decentralized finance platform called Beanstalk that was attacked in something called a flash loan attack. So there's a lot to deconstruct here, so I'm going to take my time and try to explain this. Hopefully, it's going to sound really convoluted, but I'll try my best to keep things as simple as possible. So Beanstalk is a decentralized finance platform in the sense that they want to provide finance and credit on a blockchain-based system, but they are a decentralized finance organization. So the rules in which they lend money to people or what they want to use their money to invest in is determined by the stakeholders in Beanstalk. So this is known as a DAO, or a decentralized autonomous organization, not anonymous, not necessarily anonymous, decentralized autonomous organization. And it's based on this proof of stake concept that if you've got a lot of stake in a particular sort of stable coin or some crypto, you have increasing power in how the rules are being made for that platform. So that's one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle is a lot of DeFi organizations are offering the concept of a flash loan. Now, a flash loan is where you loan an entity some amount of money without any collateral. Okay?
Okay.
But the idea is that amount of money is only available for a few seconds or a few minutes. All right? And and the validity of that amount of money is for a single sort of block or a single block of transactions. So it's like you borrowed some money from a flash loan provider. You use, when you borrow money, this is all in the crypto space, right? So you borrowed some ETH or you borrowed some Bitcoin, possibly. I think it has to be ETH because of the way this is set up. You borrow some ETH and then you, for the duration of your transaction, have that ETH, and then you invest it in something else, and then maybe you sell it for a profit, make some money, and then you pay back the loan. All of this happens in a single block or in a single transaction. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So it's like you're freezing time, right? You got this special power of borrowing money, freezing time, doing something with that money that nets you a profit, and then pay back the loan. And then there's some stipulated time period for this loan. If you don't meet that time period, or whatever, the end of transaction or something like that, then it's like you never had the money.
Right.
All the intermediary transactions get voided. Right. So it's a cool concept, and this is like one of those things that crypto bros like to brag about, that check out these amazing things that you can do with crypto that you can't do with traditional finance. Like if you have some, if you're like a pro at timing the market or something like that, you could do this. Or it's,
But again,
or everything just reverts and nothing happened. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's sounds like paradise, but
Yeah.
but this all happens in a few seconds, right? So how much
Yes.
market shift is going to happen within that 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds?
Well, let me tell
How
you.
much market?
Let me tell you, at least somebody who figured out how to exploit this, and the fact that the Beanstalk DeFi project is consensus based on proof of stake. Within 13 seconds, an attacker was able to get a flash loan of $1 billion, buy a controlling stake in Beanstalk's DeFi platform, thus giving them super majority, change the rules of the DeFi lending platform to allow them to take $182 million in central funds, right?
Wow.
Sell back the stake that they had in DeFi, so making back that original amount, that $1 billion that they had to use to buy into the supermajority stake, and then pay back the loan, netting a profit of $80 million in 13 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah, this is reported on by the Verge, and that's the thing, right? So fundamentally, the problem is that this wasn't necessarily a problem of bad code or an exploit in the software and the blockchain. It's just that these two concepts are designed this way. Like if you talk to a real crypto bro, they'll tell you, yeah, this is how it's supposed to work. Because you were able to get a flash loan without any collateral or any other or even any background checks or verification, because this is crypto, right?
Yeah.
And Beanstalk or other DeFi platforms want to write their governance rules based on who has the most amount of stake in the in that certain stable coin, so they can decide how to change the rules of how they record transactions and things like that, right? Earlier, I don't know if you know, but it's like earlier with other the problem with generation 1 crypto like Bitcoin was that if you needed to change the rules of how you mine or do transactions, then you have to change the underlying source code of how these things operate. So you have to update the coin's policies, and that usually results in something called a fork of the currency. And you might have heard of this term. No? Okay. So that means that people try to outside the blockchain, they have to come up with some consensus of like, okay, we are going to change the rules. Everybody needs to be on board, and then that kind of stuff. So they try to automate that. So when you automate that,
but how does that work? But how does that work, right? So if it's all decentralized and you have all these different people doing anonymous transactions and having different anonymous stakes in the currency, like how does that get resolved? Like in your Gen 1, like you said, Bitcoin and stuff like that. If they were to change any of the rules or policies, who makes those decisions, right? So,
yeah, no, that's a good question. So usually, like for I mean, I don't know how the consensus was reached on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was even invented by like an anonymous person. But at some point, people came to like maybe like so the idea is that if a majority of the people who are recording the transactions, mining the transactions, agree on the new set of rules, that becomes the new blockchain. right? And then the other
Right, but
blockchain will
how
just
do you,
eventually die. But you have
but
to,
like how do you get that consensus, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So
yeah,
let's say I invested in $100 worth of Bitcoin in 2007, and I
uh-huh,
forget all about it, right?
okay,
That's probably worth a lot right now,
yeah, oh,
right?
absolutely,
And
yeah,
yeah, and if I'm not paying attention to this space,
uh-huh.
how do I get a say in what's happening with my currency? If that were the case, right? So if I don't know, it might be
Yeah, no, no, no. As far
yeah,
as I
shooting in the
understand,
dark.
no, no, no. As far as I understand, and again, listeners of this podcast, feel free to leave a comment or tell me that I'm wrong, because YouTube and other platforms or even Twitter is a great place to tell me that I'm wrong about this. But the idea with stable coins and the coins that are not DeFi or DAO based is that the miners decide. So
Right.
the miners decide because they have a vested interest in keeping mining going on because they're making money, they're minting money. But as soon as those incentives change, then things could change about the currency, then causing it to have these problems, right? So it's all about the incentives. Like what is the carrot that you're feeding to, the crypto bunnies, to that keeps them coming back for either doing mining or recording transactions on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So what makes coin stable is keeping those incentives alive. As soon as you change those incentives, that's why people are really careful about how you structure those incentives and change them over time. Yeah. But yeah, that's it's crazy. And this is one of those examples of, again, we'll say this over and over again on the Texanix podcast, like always take your chips with a grain of salt, as I like to say. So
Yeah.
with anything that's the DeFi, Web3, crypto space, there's a lot of crypto bros who come up with really cool concepts but don't really think them through.
Yeah.
And it might not even some of them might be code exploits, but some of them might actually just be just design defects that cause things like this, right? So either the way flash loans are provided needs to change, or governance structures need to change. Otherwise there's going to be a lot of these attacks. So these um, the flash loan attacks have happened many times on different stable coins, apparently. So anybody who's
Right.
trying to launch a new sort of DeFi platform or a new crypto platform, this is going to be something that you're opening yourself to, like, this big target. Uh, and folks who are trying to say that proof of stake will be the solution to all of the energy problems that blockchain has. So this is like one of the reasons why you could land into trouble if you have a pure proof of stake based system to keep your blockchain alive. Like, somebody could just come in literally, well, it's not that they even had a lot of money to begin with. They just literally took a flash loan to buy a controlling stake,
Yeah.
bought it,
And the best
walked
part
away
of
with the
that
money.
is,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, anybody can take it. There's no verification and there's no repercussions, right? If you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
return it, it's just canceled out.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
well, it's, yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy. Just before, like, there was another really nice opinion piece from CoinDesk, which is, you can argue is a pro crypto website, right? It's a big major platform for all of these crypto based systems. There was a beautiful opinion piece that came out 2 years ago from Hasib Qureshi, talking about the one of the first proof of concept DeFi flash loan attacks that happened. Um, those were much lower in value because there was a $350,000 attack and a $600,000 copycat attack that happened
Was that
on.
because loans were limited? Would you know?
I believe so. I think it is because flash loans were pretty new. Flash loans were only 2 years old back then in 2020. And yeah, this is a great article for folks who want to learn more about, like, how smart contracts and flash loans and things like that work. But yeah, this is for those tuning into the video podcast. I'm kind of showing what a smart contract piece of code looks like, where you're able to get a flash loan from some external sender, and then there's this the exploit is just like, some function called go wild that happens in between the receipt of the loan and the repayment of the loan. So literally in 3 lines of code is kind of like the fundamental idea of like how a flash loan exploit works. But it's crazy. This
Tell me something.
article, yeah, go ahead.
If I mean, this might be a stupid question, but
Mm-hmm.
what's in it for the lender, right? At this point, so usually when you're giving out a loan, you're looking to make something back. In this case, yeah, granted, it reverses itself and everything. But what's in case the transaction goes through and the person who's taken the loan is successful in making a profit or driving
Yeah,
a profit
yeah.
based on that? What's in it for the lender?
Oh,
Like,
the
how does
lender
that
would
work?
there would be some lending terms, right? So there would be that I will only give you the loan, and I expect X amount extra as well for the duration
Okay.
of the
So,
loan. Yeah.
but if that does go through, now what if you were to make losses during that 10 seconds, 15-second period?
So that's the thing. None of those transactions happen.
Right.
So
Okay. So
the
it's
the
only
yeah,
gains.
exactly. It's only gains, which is again another weird concept. You're using, I mean, again, you could argue that crypto is printing money to begin with, but but yeah, this is literally only gains, right? Think about that for a second.
But why isn't everybody doing this then? Like, it seems like a no-brainer to try to do this.
That's the point.
Like,
It's like
free money, invest, and no risk.
yeah. Again,
Sounds good.
if you know more about this than either myself or Govind, please leave a comment,
Yeah.
right? Just tell us what we are missing in this whole concept, because I did spend some time. I kind of read through like what are the concepts of DAO and flash loans and things like that. But really, if there is a crypto enthusiast who has more information, we could be totally wrong, right? Like we just have a surface understanding of these things based on, again, possibly sensationalized news articles as well. But if you know more about this, and if you think that what we're talking about doesn't make sense, then please let us know. But as far as I see it, this just doesn't. This whole concept is voodoo in some sense, right? Like it's a risk. It's a riskless loan that can only gain in value. Otherwise, it never happened. It's crazy. Yeah. And so that's this is the draw, right, of crypto. Like it's these weird concepts that kind of completely disrupt or upend your traditional notions of finance, right? And that
Yeah.
a lot of young people that may, I mean, not necessarily young, but it's usually that, right? Like so, like young folks who are fresh out of whatever engineering school or whatever, and they've got their entrepreneur mindset. Those are the folks who are jumping headfirst into crypto and Web3 and things like that, right? But at some point you need to kind of stop and think about what's happening. Does it really make sense, right? And maybe talk to some academics as well, right? Because talk to some economists, talk to some computer scientists who are not invested in crypto, and talk to some security experts, because there's a lot of issues. I mean, the opportunists and the optimists will tell you that this is just because it's a new field, and it's just I don't know, man. Look at your first principles of all of these things and how these things are being built, and just really kind of talk about why these things make sense, right? Once a transaction is recorded to a blockchain, it's basically irreversible. And if you're claiming that all of your like physical money needs to stop existing, everything needs to be in crypto, then these kinds of attacks and sort of like these heists, they're just part of the recorded history, and you can't necessarily recover them unless you de-anonymize the person who did this, and then take them to court, and then force them to pay you back or something like that. But then what was the point of your whole crypto decentralized anonymous thing to begin with, if you said that, oh no, we need people to enforce rules, and we need the police to get involved, and like
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, this is where the whole thing falls apart, right?
Yeah.
Where we don't need regulations and we don't need anything else to surround this, because this is very
Yeah.
robust and you can't
Yeah.
fool it. And
Yeah.
these kind of articles, when people are stealing 182 million surface,
Yeah.
it doesn't bring much confidence to people who are already skeptical to begin with.
Yep.
And for those who are invested, they're like, okay, hang on, my money might not be safe, or maybe I need to pull out. And at which point, when you have a mass exodus of people leaving their cryptos behind in
Yeah.
exchange for your alt currencies,
Yeah.
um, then you're going to have all kinds of markets crash,
Oh
and
yeah,
none of
for
this is going to
sure.
be
For
worthwhile
sure.
anyway, right?
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Anyway, so that was this week's Web3 blockchain
Yeah,
crypto bashing for
I
for
think
the
there
podcast.
was a last bit. There was
Yeah.
a last bit on the positive note of things. If this sort of thing does happen, they seem to be able to recover some crypto loot as well. You got that
Uh,
Binance
yeah,
article. I mean,
that's true. So Binance was able to recover a portion of funds that were linked to a North Korea orchestrated Axie Infinity hack.
yeah.
So Axie Infinity is supposedly a play to earn blockchain that's based off of, I think, some kind of mobile game called Axie Infinity, which was attacked by a North Korean hacking group and known as the Lazarus Group. And
Hmm.
in association with some US government agencies, they were able to kind of be able to recover
Recovered.
some of that money apparently. This is
But
also
that's the
reported on
thing,
by
right? Uh,
Bloomberg. Yeah.
Once again, we're talking about regulations, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
they've had intervention to recover that money. Otherwise,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that just goes to show that, like, hang on, you were saying it's decentralized. There's no intervention possible.
Yeah.
But suddenly you've recovered money. I don't get it. I mean, the Binance, sure, it's this
Yeah.
exchange and everything, but it's still something doesn't add up there.
Mm.
Anyway,
Anyway, moving on to some of the other tech news this week. So there was a news article from TechRadar talking about the Galaxy S23 planning to outstrip the S22 by borrowing from cheap phones. So what's this about, Govind?
I think this talks back in with the entire chip shortage,
Mm-hmm.
thing that's been going on since COVID.
Yep.
They're not going to be able to push as many units out if they were to
Mm-hmm.
stick with their current plans.
Oh, yeah.
I think, yeah, I think it all boils down to that. But really, the question at hand is how
Mm-hmm.
fast is technology progressing that we need yearly increments of phones anymore, right? That's something I want to talk about. Is Are we seeing a significant jump anymore between model years?
Mm.
It seems like something that car manufacturers would do, right? They would
Yeah.
have 1 or 2 years
Yep.
repeat the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a mid-year facelift,
Mm.
mid-cycle facelift, and
Mm-hmm.
then do another thing after that facelift has also expired. I
Mm.
think we're getting to that place where, unless it's a flagship, which the S23 in all respect is supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
unless it's a flagship, there's no reason to do that anymore, right? So they can just
Mm.
roll out a newer version, slightly updated, maybe fix one or two things here and there. But are people really going to be upgrading to the latest one just because it's the latest?
Mm.
And also, to add to that, just Samsung in general, right? So
Mm.
they need to move on to their newer tech, right? They've been talking about foldable tech. What's happened to that, right?
Mm.
Why are they still very focused on the S20 series, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this seems like the point in which they need to do something bigger,
Mm.
because I don't think there's been such a major kind of shift in the way that Samsung has approached the Galaxy mainstream
Mm.
flagship models in a while.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
it. I mean, you raise an important point. Also, like especially in the Android space. So Apple's been doing this for a while, right? Like, they make incremental
yeah,
updates to their chips, but then what they do is they have a downstream set of devices that they can always take their other chips and sort of shuttle them down to other devices. Case in point being the new studio monitor from Apple apparently uses like an A12 bionic chip. Because they have
Yeah.
tons of those, but Apple, not everybody can do what Apple does in some sense, right? But at the same time, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like, especially with Qualcomm Snapdragon processors on flagships, it seems to be that the chips are being reused across model years in the sense that there aren't too many necessarily updates happening. I could be completely wrong about this, or maybe it was just one case of one phone that was doing this across model years. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem like there's a major revision of the chip
No.
across model years for in the
Yeah.
Android
I
space at
think.
least. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the same story applies there as well,
Mm.
right? So the gains to be had from a
Yeah.
yearly update is limited now,
Mm.
right? But I think I haven't been paying a lot of attention to the space for a
Mm.
while. But yeah, yearly updates of the Snapdragon
Yep.
processors was the expectation with a new flagship in
Mm.
the Android space anyway. But I think a few generations ago,
Mm.
what happened was they started doing the plus variants of the same model.
Mm.
So a spec bump, right? So not an entirely new chipset, but
Yeah.
maybe overclocking it or spec bumping it
Mm.
somehow, and using it for the next model year. That's what was happening. But again, it's just about naming it something different, right?
Yep.
So if we're not going for completely new architectures anyway, because that would be a complete different shift.
This is one of the things that it's a mixture of cunning and luck and spectacular design. But the coup that Apple did from their transition away from Intel into the M1,
Mm.
the M1 at this point is 1.5 years old in terms of like its launch happened in November 2020. But the
Mm.
fact that the core architecture hasn't changed, they've only kind of like doubled the processing cores. Of course, there are different dies, but they've kept the same fundamental architecture. It's an extensible architecture that they can build out on. And
Yeah.
that they're moving way more M1 chips than they're moving like the ultras and the maxes, for example. So their volumes are coming from the
Mm.
base M1 chip, for which they have at least 3 or 4 different product SKUs, right? Like they have the
Mm.
MacBook Air, they have the base MacBook Pro, the non-Macs. Their names are horrible, but anyway. And then the M1 Mini and then the iMac. They all use the M1 now. So it's just
Yeah.
it's the sy- it, they've
And the iPad
streamlined.
Pro also.
Exactly, and the iPad Pro. So they've streamlined it. They're reducing the number of chips that they depend on for multiple product lines, and they've done it in
Yeah.
such a spectacular fashion that every other manufacturer is kind of seeing the writing on the wall, right? It's
Mm.
crazy, and and the other thing is the M1 is essentially just a glorified, something like a 813 or 813 Bionic in some sense. I don't know if you know about this, but
Really?
yeah, it is. I mean, at least fundamentally
Okay.
underneath, it's they obviously add more things to it, but it's based on that same
Mm.
core architecture that Apple Silicon has designed, right? It's just that they
Right.
have it in different configurations for different endpoints, but the way Apple pulled this off, and the fact that this chip shortage happened that nobody could really anticipate, like 3 years back, even though the planning for this has
Yeah.
probably been 4 years in the making, is spectacular. And
Mm.
Apple's still one of the only few manufacturers, at least of computers or of high-end computers, where if they announce a product and you want it, you can get it within 2 to 3 weeks here in the US. Um, no other manufacturer can do
Right.
this. It's crazy. Yeah. Um, yeah. So let's see.
Cool.
Moving on to
There's
yeah. Go ahead.
there's also something about battery tech, right? So
Yes. Yes.
with mobile
So
devices, so with mobile devices, they're seeing benefits from the EV industry as well. So because
interesting.
a lot of focus is in the space of how to make batteries more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways to do that is occupy the same space but have more capacity. So you increase the battery density. That's what
Yes, absolutely.
it looks like is being the next effort made, right? So I mean, obviously there's stuff like graphene technology that
Yep.
never actually took off, but with the mainstream batteries itself, increasing the battery density seems to be a quicker way in which this can be approached in terms of gaining more efficiencies and getting more battery life out of stuff.
I see.
Obviously, just on the previous topic, on the processor side of things or the chipset side of things, obviously that's going to play a very huge role in the way the battery is actually used.
Sure.
But in the end of the day, your battery needs to be pretty significant as well, right? If you want to talk about major gains.
Yep.
So yeah, I think a lot more to be seen over there in terms of how the EV/electronics industry kind of share that battery research and development and kind of share technologies across the space.
Yeah, absolutely. For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So, um, what's some of the other topics that we want to talk about today? Let's see. So I guess we can do a quick dive on sort of display technologies and GPUs, because we had one of our listeners kind of ask us about like our opinions on the space. So
GPUs and yeah.
yeah, and especially PC building as well. So let's see. So Govind, why don't you
I
walk
think
through your
yeah,
thoughts
my,
about
my
this?
my thought process here.
Yes, yes.
So I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, right? So
Okay,
let's start about display tech.
okay.
Now, display tech, it really, what is the primary objective there? We're trying to achieve better immersion and better, and better immersion equals better visuals that's more engaging for you to look into and all that, right?
Yep.
But how much is too much and how much is really needed? Now, the other reason for that, when I say that, is because if you look at getting, let's say, a PC monitor right now, okay,
Okay.
or
Okay.
even a basic laptop right now,
Okay.
we're starting out now at 1080p as being
Yes.
the norm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And 1080p has been the norm for ages.
Correct.
I think easily 15-20 years, not
Yes.
20, maybe 15 years for sure.
Yeah.
For
15
sure,
years.
15
Yeah.
years, because I
Yeah. Yeah.
remember 15 years ago I
Yeah.
bought
720p and
a
then
1080p TV.
1080p. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. 15 years. Yeah.
So that's a very long life cycle for something to hold its place as the dominant one, right?
Okay.
I know 2K, 4K, everything came out. 4K monitors, they were successful, but now people are buying them only by the virtue of its pricing, right? So it's not something people need still. It's
Okay.
people buying it because they can afford it. And I'm not talking about professionals who need the
Yeah. Yeah.
display
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
resolution. I'm
Absolutely.
talking about regular folk
Yep.
who need to buy a TV or need to buy a monitor for their whatever purposes, right? So
Okay.
4K, mostly overkill, mostly.
Okay.
But unless you're
Okay.
super, enthusiast where you need to have that ultra high definition movie watching experience, right? So um, even then we're talking about at the point we're talking about the size of the display, right? That really comes into the picture. Now we have an
Okay.
example here where it says if you have a regular eyesight like as 20/20 vision, while sitting 10 feet away you need a 75-inch diagonal, right, for HD, and in comparison to that you need a 120-inch diagonal for 4K to differentiate between the two. And as the Ks go up,
Yeah.
it gets even more ridiculous, right? So
Okay.
to appreciate the difference between a 4K display and an 8K display, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
you would need that 120-inch screen to go to a 280-inch screen
Okay.
where it becomes the same to your eye.
Yep.
So anything smaller than a 280-inch screen, which is basically a wall, right, for a 8K display is virtually, most people won't be able to distinguish the difference between that
Gotcha.
and a 4K display.
Gotcha.
So question is, why are we taking that route in terms of effort, right? So there is a physical, obviously,
Yeah.
limitation
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
space where you can put a TV.
I will push back a little bit because so I've had 4K displays for since 2014.
Yeah.
That's on my primary monitor. That's 28 inches across. And whenever I went down to a 1080p display, that would really annoy me. But that's
Yeah, but
that's okay. That's
I
something
think
else. But also the article that you're referencing is talking about a 10 feet distance. So,
yeah, we're
which is
talking
very
mostly about TVs, right?
yeah. So
Exactly.
for TV, 100% I agree with you. Like, there's
Yeah.
almost no need for gaming consoles to have higher than 1080p for the average living room couch gamer.
I think what's more beneficial is having higher frame rates rather than
Absolutely.
anything, right?
Higher frame rates and HDR, uh, and possibly higher render resolutions if you want to smooth jaggies and things like that, right? Like if you want better anti-aliasing and things like that. That's in fact, like Nvidia does this with DLSS, and then there's a couple of other
Yeah.
things that consoles do to do this. But to be honest, and you can watch a lot of videos from, say, Linus Tech Tips talking about, like, especially in the space of the living room and consoles. 100% I agree with you. Most cases you don't need to go above 1080p. It's
Yeah.
detrimental to, especially for graphics, right? Because you need to have all the graphical horsepower to push that many more pixels out. It's going to be really hard
Exactly.
for your GPU
Keep up
to
with it.
keep up with this. The analog in the PC space, I think, would be with laptops. There's almost no reason for you, if you're having a laptop display that's 14 inches or less. There's almost no reason for it to be higher than
More
1080p.
than 1080p.
Sure,
I've
like
got a 2K display
yeah,
on my laptop, and it's a 14-inch. The
yeah,
2K, now, like for normal use cases, I need to turn up text scaling at least
yeah,
by
yeah,
one notch,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
like then what are you doing? Like
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
pointless. Like it's
One of the biggest
so
mistakes I
yeah.
made was I had a 13-inch Dell XPS with a 4K screen. It was one of the stupidest things that I did, because I was so used to my 28-inch 4K desktop
That's
display,
exactly right.
right?
Yeah.
But the fact that I had it on a 13-inch, I had to turn up the scaling to like something obnoxious like 200%, and the diminished battery life as a result on laptops that
Yeah.
have higher resolution displays. It's not worth it. If you're carrying an ultra portable that's like 13 inches, there's just no reason, absolutely no reason for you to have 4K. You should just go with a higher refresh rate display if you can for your gaming laptop. And higher refresh rate is more crucial to you if you're playing Twitch shooters, and if you're playing more cinematic games. 60 FPS is generally fine for cinematic games. 120 is
Yeah.
great if you
Yeah.
play a lot of Counter-Strike and things like that. So
Excuse me.
the main reason to get 4K is if you have a desktop, if you have a display that's bigger than 23,
Yeah.
24 inches.
24.
Yeah.
Bigger than
Then
24, you need to go to at least 2K.
yeah,
At
at
least
least
2K.
at least at least 2K 1440p. Um, and if you're doing any kind of creative work, if you're working on big timelines, if you're an audio or video editor, 3D modeler, if you do a lot of Photoshop, Illustrator work, then you will really appreciate the extra screen real estate that you get from a 4K screen. Apple Macs have been pushing, like iMac displays have been pushing
5K
5K
displays.
for a long, long time. So for
Yeah,
them,
but then
it's
again, we're talking about the creator space, right? So the
exactly.
creators and people who need that professionally,
Yeah,
that's good. That's
yeah,
fine.
absolutely,
I have
absolutely.
no gripe with that.
So
I
yeah,
was more interested in like how the industry seems to be pushing everyone to buy something that they really don't, right? For
yeah,
ages, and that was my premise: is
yeah.
1080p for the masses is really still good,
Oh,
and I think
100%.
that's the resolution that's been a standard for the most number of years in sequence. Because I think
Yep,
before that, you've had, every at least few 5-6 years, you've had something improve on display
yep,
tech in
yep.
terms of resolution,
Yeah, so
right?
for the longest time it was
Um,
yeah, so before 1080p was 720p for a while,
it was
for a short while, because they coexisted with 1080p. 1080p was the premium resolution.
exactly, but
And
but
before that
what most people were
it was
using.
DVD before that, right? 480p was before that. Yeah.
Yes, and then but in the PC space or
Yeah.
monitor space, it
Yeah.
was like 800, 600, and 640,
1024.
480.
Yeah, 1024
Yeah,
by 768
well,
was the main, well, at least for the pros. If you had a 17 or 19-inch
exactly.
CRT, yeah, that was the main resolution that a lot of people used
Yeah, and
back
then
then. Yeah.
it got a little better with 1280, 960 also, or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
or 1280 1024. Something was there in between the
Yes,
1024 70
and at
kind of
some
thing.
point we all kind of moved towards 16:9 aspect ratio. Remember, old computer displays used to
Yes,
be square-ish,
exactly.
not exact squares,
4
but
by 3,
squarish.
yeah.
Yeah, 4 by 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the other things that I would say is in terms of like a buying guide for folks listening to this podcast, like I think instead of doing the resolution game, you want to think about image quality, image clarity. And the one thing that
Yeah.
seems to keep jumping out at me is just black levels, IPS displays, and HDR. Like once you experience it, it's something else. It's hard to go back. So I
Yeah.
currently have a 32-inch LG display that is capable of 165 hertz. It's a TN panel though. And because of that, it's the black levels aren't great, so I don't really particularly enjoy like video on this. Like your blacks are more grayish, but
Right.
whenever I pull something up on my MacBook Pro with the M1 Max, the the and that has some version of sort of Dolby. I'm not sure if it's it is some version of Dolby Vision certification, and it's capable of doing at least I think 600 nits peak. The like whenever I pull up, like for example Apple TV Plus HDR content, those are those real aha moments. Like when I see just absolutely beautiful, well filmed, like scenes on that display. It just blows me away of how good it is. Like in spite of having a much larger desktop monitor or even a projector over here at home, I cannot like the visual fidelity that you get from a good HDR display with a good brightness level and really good black levels. That's the space where the premium displays are at right now. Like, so, the QLED, sort of like
Yeah.
quantum dot stuff, which is usually out of the price range for most people, obviously. Um, so that's one of the benefits. That's one of the extra, the money you spend on Apple. Sort of, that's one of the tangible
Yeah.
benefits that Apple people will tell you is like just the display quality on some of these things
Yeah, they've
is
never had
amazing.
bad displays, right?
Yeah,
They've always focused a lot on display.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, you bring a good point, right? That was my next thing as well, is the technology itself, right? So
yeah.
before we move to that, though, like that 280-inch display that you need to have for 8K, I think something besides the Samsung wall TV, uh, it would
Yeah,
uh, it would be completely pointless, right? Even at this is still 150 inches,
yeah.
or actually no, it's 292 inches. 292 inches with 8K is fair enough, right? So that's when you start to appreciate having that 8K resolution.
And
But
so
again, this,
yeah, this is
yeah, I was just
so
saying, this
you know
is,
that this is either going into super rich suburban households, or it's going to be a commercial display, right? That's kind of
yeah,
what Samsung's gonna, for display walls for retail and showroom spaces and things like that.
right.
That's where this makes sense. Like if you visit some of the Apple flagship stores in the US, you see some unbelievable display walls that they have there. That's where you have the oohs and the ahs. But this is obviously not going to be a thing for the average consumer or even the
Not,
prosumer, right? Yeah, not even close.
yeah, not even close, and not for 150,000 or 125,000, which this costs
Maybe if you're Elon
dollars.
Musk, maybe, but like if you're anybody else,
Yeah, but
no.
then see, at that price, you can
Yeah.
build a home theater, like a proper home theater,
So this is
like with all your sound,
this
the
is
best projector
oh yeah,
ever.
easily. Yeah, this is something that's really interesting because you kind of see this happening, of course, among like rich elite privileged people, even in places like Kerala, for example. Like the number of folks doing custom home theater
Home theaters,
installations is
it's a
insane.
lot.
I've been to a couple of them. And it's easy to justify that with the price of a cost in the price of a home or a cost of home in India. It's like, oh yeah, I have a budget like for like, yeah, I'm going to build a house, so I'm anyway spending say 3 crores or 4 crores, so I'm going to spend 25 lakhs on on my home theater setup or something like that, right? Like, yeah, that's
You
the
could.
thing
If
that
you're
people
spending
do.
three
Yeah.
crores on a house, then
Yeah, sure, absolutely, go for it. Whatever makes you happy. And in India,
exactly.
definitely the space is much easier for you to do stuff like that with projection, as opposed
Hmm,
to doing that with a screen, because the screens are obnoxiously expensive when you try to hit those scales, right? And in India,
for
that's the
sure.
thing. That kind of displays are driven by people wanting to have a cinema-like experience at home, so they can watch their blockbusters, right? Like KGF, or all the regional blockbusters at home with all that amazing sound and stuff like that. So it's going to be an
Yeah.
interesting market. Obviously, it's a very tiny fraction of the market. A lot of people are still watching.
Hmm.
The number of people watching content on their phones is never fails to surprise me. I don't. There are people who watch entire movies on their phones. I can't do it, but I'm sure there are
Yeah,
people who
I
watch
can't do it
entire.
either. The
But
max I can handle is an iPad, and it's that even then it's challenging to
yeah,
get that continuity on.
my main advice, I see the talking points that you have here. My main advice for folks like this is try to get good image fidelity as much as possible. Concentrate on black levels, because that's something that irritates me quite a bit. And don't invest in brand new display technologies on Gen 1, like the first product that they
Yeah.
come out. Now, the reason is not just of common sense, but it's also usually out of your price range. Those are the early adopter tax on some of those crazy display technologies are insane. You can watch videos from Linus about this. Like, oh, I wish I had
Hmm.
known about some of the issues that I have, because folks who bought
I
Gen 1
think,
OLED displays, for example, have had burn-in, right?
yeah.
Um, it's
And other technologies, right? So
yeah,
it's all these different things like QLED, OLED, mini LED, micro LED, all these different things that have entered the space right now.
yeah, yeah.
I think people are buying OLED TVs. I think even LG has a couple of OLED models that are
Yep.
specific to gamers, and they've
Yep.
been
Yep.
quite intensively talked about.
Mm.
But again, with any technology, like Suhail, you said, you shouldn't really get into the first adopter space, because
Yep.
usually there's something that follows that is
Yep.
an
Yep.
improvement on that same
Yes, and
technology,
then you'll
well,
get
at a
the previous
lower price
technology.
point as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as far as the US is concerned, it might not be useful for folks back in India, but prices are not bad. Like, for example, this is from Best Buy, and you can
Yeah.
get some pretty killer TVs, like 65, 55 inch, 65 inch, or even 75 inch TVs for under. Some of them are under $1,000, some
$1,000.
of them under
Wow.
$800. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's a very competitive space over here. The market is really huge. Um,
Hmm.
TV buying is like a thing in the US, like especially before the Super Bowl or before
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, right? Like that's one of those big ticket items. Right now, when you do your tax returns, for example, that's when you may have enough of a refund that you need to get back from the government
Refund.
that
Yeah.
that will
Hmm.
pay for a nice TV. In India, obviously, the space is
Hmm.
different, and usually India, the mainstream TV technologies that come out in India is probably like a generation behind. If you wanted to get
Hmm.
a high class QLED display in India, I mean, I could look it up, maybe Chroma or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
those will be expensive. So QLED is definitely great that way. The other
Yeah.
thing that's really important, and this is something that I've heard time and time again on other podcasts that I listen to all the time. Try your best to get a dumb TV. Don't get a smart TV. It's increasingly
Yeah,
hard.
because you could plug something in.
No, it's increasing. So it's even more obnoxious than that. Like, so TV companies like Xiaomi, and other companies have started putting ads on top of live content.
Oh.
So even if you
But
get a
is it
smart TV, make sure
really?
it's disconnected from the internet. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I was about to say. Is like, how many non-smart TVs do you get right now? Like, I think
It's
that
very
comes as a
hard.
default, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
quite hard.
But why are
Um,
companies doing that anymore? Like, they should just have a Fire TV, Fire Stick just thrown in, or a Roku or something like that. Like, just throw it with the package, plug it in, because you're
so
you're
TCL does
immediately
this,
going to
right?
cut your
Yeah.
yeah you're immediately cutting your costs of software development and maintenance for all your smart TV offerings, right? So our software
So
updates don't have
the
to be
the
as
reason
frequent and most.
manufacturers do this is the main reason is tracking. right? That information is
Mm.
really valuable to them. They want to know what you're watching, and they want to phone back home and maybe send back screenshots of stuff you're watching or some kind of data about what you're watching. And that information is super valuable, okay, especially in surveillance capitalism based economies like the US. I have heard
Mm.
stories that even if you don't connect a Samsung TV to Wi-Fi, um, Samsung, like I don't know if this is a conspiracy theory or if it's actually verified. Like they will try to piggyback off of other Samsung TVs in your vicinity.
Mm.
Yeah, so
What, like an ad hoc connection between the
yeah, exactly,
devices?
with an ad hoc connection to other TVs just to be able to phone home.
Wow.
This is a tangent we didn't expect, but it's again, this is on
Yeah.
brand for our podcast, right? We want to talk about some of these crazy
Let's
issues that nobody really pays attention to.
I think it, yeah, we talks back with the different technologies that have failed,
Yeah,
right, in the
yeah.
past, like putting cameras on TVs. 3D TV. I know you had one,
I
right?
had
You
a
had a
3D
3D
TV
TV.
back in the day.
Wow, that didn't work out.
I feel
That did
like
not work out.
yeah. So I had maybe 3 4 3D Blu-ray movies, and then I watched the 2012 London Olympics in 3D. But that was it.
Yeah.
That was the extent of my 3D journey with 3D, and
Well, that's where 3D TV died, along with everything else that went around
man,
new TV
the
technology. Like,
3D TV hype train 10 years ago was
yeah,
insane. If you remember it, like I fell for it.
yeah,
A lot of people fell for it.
yeah.
And the speed at which they abandoned it. Like there could have been a possibility if all of these TV manufacturers agreed upon a universal glass standard, but
Mm.
every TV had their own standard for what kind of glasses you needed. Then you
Yeah,
needed
so
to,
the passive, active, all of that
yeah,
different
shutter
types of
glasses.
technologies to begin with.
It was different between different manufacturers. They had different signaling protocols between different manufacturers. It was a mess, man. Man.
Yeah,
But yeah, so yeah, those are the things based on display. And when you want to build your own PC, it looks like the sort of the GPU apocalypse is slowly starting to die down because I'm starting to see availability
that's true.
of mainstream GPUs coming closer to
Or
MSRP.
normalish,
Yeah.
yeah, normalish
What was
rates.
really
Same in
interesting
India.
what was really interesting is that the peak of the shortage, it looked like India was a reasonable place to buy GPUs compared to the US. Like the
Yeah,
market
yeah,
size
because
wasn't
it
as
wasn't that
huge.
inflated,
The market size
but
wasn't
it was
as
inflated. It
it
was
was
almost
inflated.
double the price. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was nothing compared to US scalper pricing. It felt I
Hmm.
genuinely felt like it was easier for me. Like I was in India in Kerala in December of 2021. I visited a gaming focused PC store in Calicut. And for the first time in my life, I saw a 30 series graphics card in person.
Hmm.
And it had to be in like my tier 3 town in India, in Kerala, where I actually saw a 30 series graphics card for the first time in person. As things cool down, obviously we'll may go back to the natural balance of GPUs being cheaper here in the US when compared to India.
Yeah.
But in general, like I would say, take your target games that the type of games that you play the most. If you take a target resolution and then kind of build your PC around for that. There's tons of guides online. The thing
Definitely.
that we could offer is some perspective based on like for an Indian audience compared to the US. And that's something that maybe I could toss a few sort of suggestions to you, Govind, and you could kind of talk about like what the situation is. My
Sure.
understanding is for most people who are casual gamers in India, um, and if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you're usually better off getting a gaming laptop.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if that's
Mm,
again, if you're a PC gamer. Now,
yeah.
I have another point over here, right? So
Hmm.
why not just get an Xbox Series S
Hmm.
because that's available, right? There's no shortage for that,
Yeah. It's increasingly
right?
available.
Get a
Yes.
Series.
Yes.
No, it's been available. It never faced any shortage in India. It's
Oh,
always been
interesting.
available on Amazon
Interesting.
India.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Xbox Series X and the PS5, not so much, right? But the Series S has always been.
What's MSRP for the Series X in India right now? I'm just
I
looking that up
think
real quick.
32, 33K.
That's beautiful.
You can get one for
For
31, yeah, 32K.
for what? So the Series X, the higher end version, is 50K, close to.
49,999, yeah.
Yeah.
And right,
And
Series
the
S is right now on Amazon at 32,470
32
for
470.
Series S,
Series S.
right? So 32,500, yeah. You could get them cheaper, but then you might have to pay for extra shipping and stuff. But
Yeah.
the MSRP on that is 34,990,
Mm-hmm.
but it usually goes in around 32. You should be able to get one.
I can guarantee
And
that you cannot get a gaming laptop that comes anywhere close to the
no, you
graphical
can't.
fidelity of the Series S for that price.
100%.
Yeah.
You're at least spending double that to get a
Yeah.
gaming laptop as
Yeah.
decent,
Yeah.
right? Which brings me to the point, right? So if you're gaming,
Yeah.
just get this. Just get this and get Game Pass. That's it. That's all
Yes.
you need
Yes.
in life.
Now, if you are still in school, the gaming laptop is an easier way to convince your parents to give you money to buy something compared to a gaming console.
But
right? Yeah.
again, gaming laptop. If you're in school and you want a gaming laptop, okay,
Yeah.
what you can target to convince is for a 1650, a laptop with a 1650, which is not so great.
Yeah, it's a maybe
You're gonna play
70%.
everything in medium low.
60 to 70% of the raw horsepower of what you would get on a Series S, maybe less,
Yeah.
maybe 40%.
But
maybe.
again,
Yeah.
but you can guarantee everything that comes out in Series S
Yeah.
S will work out perfectly, right? You don't need to adjust anything. You don't need to sacrifice anything in
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
What you get is what you get, right? That's the console USB anyway.
And if you're if you're a responsible gamer, you're legally acquiring your games anyway. And increasingly, it's really becoming more and more horrible to become an irresponsible gamer, a person who pirates all their games. I won't talk about my past, but the thing is,
It was too easy.
Not only was it too easy,
It was too easy.
the risks weren't as bad as they are now. The risks are
not
pretty
just the risks,
crazy.
right?
No, the risks are pretty crazy because depending on where you get your wares, your pirated versions of your games these days, they could be loaded with keyloggers, crypto
Malware.
miners, malware. It's
Yeah.
definitely like, and the more
Not
games you
worth it.
install, the worse your PC is gonna end up. And I've seen it happen right in front of my eyes these days. But yeah. But the other thing, the thing I think that makes the Series S even more irresistible, we've talked about this in previous podcasts as well, Game Pass. If you get Game Pass, if you're an Xbox person, and if you get Game Pass, I don't know if EA Play is included because then you'd get FIFA 22 as well. You're set. Frankly, it's a wonder that more Xboxes aren't flying off the shelves in India at that pricing, because the PS5 seems to still have this Halo status, and like, you know, all the pro people are still behind the PS5 and getting FIFA as well. Yeah.
A lot of people are just waiting for that PS5 to, be available to them because they want the best one, right?
Yeah.
But the best one is completely relative, right? So
Yeah.
you're basically trying to get a PS5 to run 4K on a 1080p display that you have. Like, what are you doing? Why? Just get the Series S.
I like that. Yeah.
It's like you've been waiting for like a year and a half or a little longer than that to get something that you really can't use the benefits of. Like, why would you bother doing that? Just get the Series S. And again, we're like digressing a lot from the PC building part of things.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Specific to gamers, just get an Xbox Series S and get Game Pass, and you're done.
Yep. I agree.
Right?
Until PC component prices cool off a little more and you have a good reason to use your PC for something else. Like if you are into, if you're a creator, if you do modeling work, for example, if you do video editing, things like that, that's when the conversation changes, obviously, and then it kind of makes sense for you to. But again, the GPU prices being the way they are these days, if your focus is only gaming,
it's not anywhere close to
If you
It's
focus
not worth
on,
it. It's not worth
yeah,
it
it's
because
not worth it.
a GPU. I'll tell you what. You know what? Let me do this again. Let me run a search for RDX 3060. Right,
Yeah.
3060 is going to come in at 47,000 bucks, 48,000 bucks for
Yeah.
the cheapest one.
Ouch.
Right, that's a Galax.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that's the other problem in India. They have the tier 2 GPU brands because when
yeah,
30 series GPU that I saw in Calicut, for example, that was from a brand called Colorful. Like retailers here in the
yeah.
US don't even stock. These are cards that you get in the US only through AliExpress, for example. I have
Be wary.
they're second tier, depending on the warranty that you get from your whoever your seller is or whatever. I'm still wary about those cards, man. Like I don't know, like I
There
don't
you
know
go.
I don't know how good their
But
thermal solution is, and all of that stuff. So yeah,
I mean, there is a Zotac one for 49,000 ish.
Zotac's still
So
better. Yeah, Zotac's is a tier 1
right,
manufacturer. Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
49,000 for just a 3060, right? Let's say you're not going for RTX. Let's say you're trying to mimic the same 1650 but in desktop, right? Let's say how much 1650. That's the cheapest one you probably want to get, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
comes in at about an Asus one is for 27,000. Zotac
Whew.
is for 25,000. So 25,000
Yikes.
right there, you put 6 more K in, like you get an Xbox.
I think yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Absolutely, it completely makes sense that
And
way.
you
Yeah,
build a PC with that, right? You're getting inferior performance out of a GPU that
yeah,
that really isn't all that. You have to get yourself a motherboard, a
yeah.
processor, a decent processor, RAM, power supply, all of that stuff that goes along with building a PC. Not
Absolutely.
to mention a monitor,
Yes.
uh,
I mean,
right? To use all,
you need a display for the Xbox, but then it's very likely that you already have a TV
but
at home. So
you
yeah,
have a TV. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I
So there
agree.
is no justification to game on a PC right
Yeah,
now on a
yeah,
budget.
yeah. No, I think I agree with you. One article that we wanted to talk about that's related is that
Yeah.
in
So Intel, like
Intel's.
I think on our second podcast, I spoke a
Mhm.
little bit about how the kind of duopoly of AMD and Nvidia is coming to a close, with Intel trying to play in the same market. Again,
Okay.
debatable, right? Debatable, and it depends on how they execute this.
I'm going to be
And
extremely cynical because this has been what 10, 15 years in the making. Okay, I mean, like
yeah, well,
there
fair
was
enough.
always an Intel GPU hype cycle that was repeating over and over again. Back 10 years back, it was about a new GPU architecture that they were pioneering called the Larrabee. They said that it's going to outperform and out whatever. Intel never released the GPU. They did build a data center product out of the Larrabee for high performance computing. Um, all I have to say about Intel's GPU, discrete GPU offerings, whether it's on the desktop or laptop space, is I'll hold off until it shows up because people have been burnt multiple times about the Intel trying to create a hype cycle for their GPUs, and they always get out GPU'd by Nvidia, and then they just kind of like quietly disappear off into the distance, right? So
Yeah,
we'll see. I
I think
mean, we
the
could be wrong, right? This could be the year of finally like Intel crushing it with the GPU, but unless we see large scale benchmarks, we'll see how things go. It's the
yeah,
hold that Nvidia has had on the space is absolutely astonishing. I was in school when
and the
the
increments,
TNT,
right?
yeah, and I was in school when the TNT came out because 3DFX Voodoo was the big GPU back then, and the way that they pulled off that heist from 3DFX and then fundamentally established mostly a dominant market position with maybe one or two generations that went over to AMD, but for the at least for the past 5 6 years, it's just unbeaten, and it's not good for consumers as we see right now, right? Like the fact that yes, AMD has cheaper offerings, but nobody really wants them. I mean, people, budget-minded
Yeah.
gamers can definitely get them, and if you're in India,
If you don't want,
yeah, it's an
if you
option
don't want
to
ray
look at it.
tracing, if you don't want ray
Yeah,
tracing, why not?
yeah,
But again,
and
it's not mainstream.
it's not
Like
mainstream exactly.
nobody refers to graphics cards and thinks about AMD right away. They think about Nvidia, right?
Exactly, exactly.
And the same thing here is your 40 series
Yeah,
Nvidias are in
the
testing.
rumored to be in testing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's another thing is the jump between each cycle, just like what we spoke about the mobile processors
Yeah.
having incremental jumps every year. This isn't every year, obviously. Nvidia does more 2 year, 3 year cycles, but
Sort of.
still the jump
Yes.
is huge. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, they don't have a fixed cycle, but usually it's around 2 years, 2.5 years. But
So I
it's
have
been
a
the same.
I
Yeah.
have a 1080 Ti that I bought on launch day in 2017.
Mm,
Still going fantastic. I was when the 3080 was launched on launch day. I tried to. That was the natural jump for me because it was a huge leap in performance as compared to the 20 series versus the 1080 series, right? Like the 2080 wasn't that great of a jump for the 1080, but the 3080 with ray tracing and all of that stuff was a huge jump. But then the speculation and then the chip shortage and the scalping and the fact that I've been going on a year and a half trying to get one of those, at least at MSRP.
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
it's really left a bad taste in my mouth. I've been continuing with the 1080 Ti. It's been great for most games. I'm one of those crazy people because I do a little bit of VR, and
Mm.
I also really want to have a nice rig to do Flight Simulator.
Right.
And those are kind of the things that really that's where I kind of see the age of my GPU right now. But the fact that the GPUs are just generally not available to begin with, like there were points in time where I could have sold my GPU for a profit. The
Mm.
1080 Ti was in such demand because nobody could get any GPU. It was crazy. Yeah, I think yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, so let's move on to um, sort of some of the automotive stories for this week. So go and take it away.
Yeah. So let's power through this, right? So it's Datsun, Nissan's budget brand. Well, what was earlier Nissan anyway, but now more recently became their budget-focused brand, is now exiting India, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I kind of saw this coming,
yeah. I mean,
just
like,
because the
yeah,
numbers, just the
exactly,
numbers,
exactly, right.
like
That was a bad strategy to begin with. I don't know why they needed to do any kind of brand dilution in a space
yeah,
like
yeah.
India, in some sense, right?
What they should have done is keep the Nissan brand and make the budget cars an option. They would have had much more footfall in their showroom, even more than
Yeah,
they have right now. And they really should have left it at that. But unfortunately, they didn't do that. And now they're discontinuing. And they did announce that this could be potentially happening in 2019.
yeah.
But now it's finally time, and they're shutting shop. So yeah, I mean, it came and went. Um,
Mm,
Not much of an impact. But
mm.
I presume some cars are going to be cheaper now to buy on the used market.
Yeah. How's Nissan doing in India? That's the other question.
Not very good.
Mm,
Honestly, like they had a few attempts at
yeah.
bringing. I think the only international model they had anymore was the Nissan Kicks, right?
Yeah.
Which is again a small crossover.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't sell too well. It
Okay.
had all the Nissan equations going on. It had good power, it had
Mm-hmm.
good drivetrain, but it never took off, and people never like trusted the brand here ever
Okay.
since their foray with the uh, what was it called? The Ultima looking thing that was released in India, something with a T. I can't remember now.
Terrano.
Yeah, that didn't really work. No, no, the Ultima
Oh.
looking thing.
Oh, I
It was
see.
something else.
Oh, I see.
The
Okay. Okay.
Terrano,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, since you mentioned the Terrano was nothing but the Duster, the Renault Duster, which was a
Yes.
Dacia Duster,
Uh,
was
that's yeah.
renamed
Yeah.
and rebadged. Yeah.
The butt of
So
all the Top Gear jokes. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that was the
Good
Sandero, but
news.
yeah, that was
Yeah, the
this.
Dacia
That's
Sandero.
that's just Sandero, but yeah, sure. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, right now they have one model that's selling decently, and it came out
Mm-hmm.
last year. Was the Nissan Magnite, which is again smaller subcompact SUV, the under sub 4 meter category. It looks really good. And if it weren't Nissan, if it was some other brand, it would have sold much more. Right, that's the thing. By looks, it looks really good, and they have the equivalent counterpart from Renault as well,
Yeah.
which is the Kiger,
Oh, right,
the
right, right,
Renault
right.
Kiger. Yeah.
Yeah, Renault was. I remember they had these extensive. They had an extensive ad campaign last year when I was in India. I don't know if it was the Kiger, but I really
Could have
liked it
been.
because they leaned in heavily on the fact that they were a French company, so they were using like Daft Punk or Stardust in the music for the. So only folks who know about that would actually like kind of
Yeah.
it really hit me because like, oh, that's cool. It's like French house music for a nice French brand in India, but I'm sure that wasn't enough to move units or may even make a dent in.
Speaking of
Yeah, go ahead.
speaking of French brands in India, like Citroën.
Yes.
Citroën, they had their C5 Aircross. They're still selling it, but it's the price point is so premium.
Yeah.
Why would you go buy a new brand that's like not established itself, and you could buy a Jeep Compass top of the line for the same
Yeah.
price?
Yeah.
I mean, for what it is, it's a really nice car and it's supposed to be very comfortable. It's supposed to be the one best riding of the segment, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't seen too many. But there is that exclusivity factor. If you do end up buying one, it's definitely noticed on the road because it looks different than everything
Yeah.
else.
True.
So yeah, I mean, French brands in
But
India,
yeah, but then
yeah,
if you're hitting that price point, then you might as well go for the established luxury brands, right? In India.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
That's yeah. I mean that market
Well,
is difficult to crack anyway because people will
yeah,
recognize
they're
Mercs and
coming
BMs
out
and
with
Audis. Yeah.
yeah, they're coming out with a smaller car, the C3. It's in production already in India, and it's I think I saw one in the street, but again, it wasn't being sold out of a showroom. I think it might have been like a demo piece or something like that. But yeah, the C3 is coming, so hopefully they should be able to move some of those because that's again the sub 4 meter segment. There's a lot of competition in the space, like we've spoken about
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that falls in the same space as the Magnite and the Kiger.
Yeah. It looks like brands are increasingly getting frustrated with the Indian market and not being able to make a dent in the established space with Maruti and Hyundai and to some extent Tata showing some growth as well. But yeah,
People are buying different brands though now. I think people are more open to buying different brands nowadays, though. You see a lot
just to
more
differentiate
like
themselves and kind of like there are aspirational brands as well, right? So yeah, I think so.
exactly, and people are not so concerned with a resale value or
Interesting.
how is it going to be to live with. Like I don't see that happening because otherwise they wouldn't be buying these brands up, right? They wouldn't be buying all these different things. And even if you look at like the used car market right now,
Yeah.
the prices of cars aren't depreciating like a lot. Like obviously Suzuki or Maruti Suzuki has its place in the used car market, but it's more often than not, if you're not buying something super old,
Yeah.
it's not worth it to buy a used car. Just go buy a new car
Yeah.
because it wouldn't have depreciated much in the first place.
Yeah, the only exception to that, at least from certain markets like Kerala, for example, I would say was the Toyota Innova because that is heavily holds its value, and Toyota knows it, and that's how the price creep on the Innova was insane, right? Like introduced to something like 15 years
12
back
lakhs,
for
13 lakhs.
no, even less, right? Like initially 15 years ago it
No,
was
on road.
yeah, yeah. No, even then it was initial prices like 2004, 2005. Ex showroom was closer to 7 or 8.
Really?
Yeah, ex showroom. Yeah, exactly. And then the price creep that happened with Innova was just insane. Um, and yeah, that's a vehicle that proved itself, both that and its predecessor, the Qualis. There are still Qualises driving around in Kerala or in India even now, even though the Qualis has been discontinued for over 15 years, right? There have been
Yeah.
that's the only exception to the, I would say, the rule of people not caring about resale value. But then you pay for that resale value. Toyota charges through the nose for those premium vehicles, at least that are not rebadged,
You're right.
Suzukis, right? Like so. Yeah.
Innova 04, 862 on road. I mean, not on road,
Yeah,
showroom price.
yeah, exactly. I remember. Yeah, it was very
Wow.
compelling back then, but then the way the price creeped on that year on year, and if you remember, Gen 2 Innova wasn't very different from Gen 1 Innova. It was just a basic facelift compared to
Facelift.
compared to the Krista. Krista has a slight platform deviation, but the platform's overall more or less very similar to Gen 1, with some slight tweaks on the wheelbase and design and things like that. But yeah, man, Innova is, if anything, it's one of those examples of a rare success story in a price sensitive market in India, right? Like Toyota being able to charge the prices that they do for what is basically not a super premium product. My dad, so we have an Innova Krista Z at home. My dad was complaining about the rear tailgate. So they reinforced the rear tailgate compared to the previous Innova. We had the previous Innova before the Krista, and we use it on long drives. So they reinforced the rear tailgate and made it extremely heavy. I think it's for crash or impact protection on for Krista.
Okay.
And after a trip, we didn't close the tailgate properly, so the interior dome lights stayed on for 2 weeks, and our entire battery drained.
Battery dead.
Yeah. Now, this is the top of the line full options Innova. Like Toyota should have put a lift gate on that, given how heavy the tailgate is.
More importantly,
Yeah.
even if they didn't have a power lift gate,
Yeah.
the light shouldn't have stayed on for that long.
Exactly. That's the other thing. Like, why wasn't
Isn't there
there
auto
some...
cutoff?
They're
Like,
supposed to be. So those are the
It's
things
odd.
those are the things that Toyota does in the Indian market. It's like, there will be those splashy features. They'll be like, yeah, wow, we've got Android Auto or whatever. But then the kinds of corners that they cut, even though you're spending 30 plus lakhs on road for one of these things, is mind-boggling.
yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Cool. Let's move on. Yeah.
We wanted to talk about the we touched on this in the earlier versions of the podcast, the fact that the emerging EV scooter market in India is facing some hiccups. It was initially just a one-off couple of news articles, 2-3 weeks back when we first talked about it on our podcast. But those problems are starting to mount heavily. So we have an article from Reuters about talking about Ola Electric now recalling 1,441 e-scooters because of the incident I think we talked about last time about a fire.
Burning.
Yes. So the Indian government has also gotten involved because a lot of these, this is not just isolated to Ola Electric, because there was a explosion of a one of the other brands. I forget. This is Jitendra EV. No, Pure EV. A Pure EV scooter was charging in the living room of a person in Telangana. It exploded and killed an 80-year-old man. And so one of the benefits of EV scooters is the fact that you can disconnect and take the battery home to charge it. Does the Ola Electric allow you to do this as well?
No.
Okay, so some brands allow you to do this.
Some brands, but that's the whole concept of the swappable battery.
Yeah, swappable
thing, right?
batteries.
So you get
right?
two batteries,
So,
so you can keep one on charge and then take the other one out.
Exactly. But then if you don't address like adequate safety concerns, we've seen this happen before with hoverboards. The ultra cheap Chinese hoverboards need an outsized high density lithium ion battery to be able to provide that kind of propulsion, right? In a small compact form factor, they need to support the weight of like a kid or possibly an adult.
Adult.
and then they're priced at a super cheap because they're fundamentally toys. And then they just became these rolling fire hazards. And the fear is that, with this emerging segment and this intense price competition, everybody trying to outbid each other in terms of providing the cheapest EV scooter or whatever, like corners are being cut. With the chip and material shortages, you might have to go to sketchy suppliers for the different parts that you need for your EV scooters. And a lot of these issues are starting to plague. A third issue that was reported was a batch of 20 electric scooters from Jitendra EV just as they were exiting the factory gate caught fire.
Wow.
So
Wow.
people were lucky that they didn't end up in consumers' hands. But yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So yeah, a bunch of high-profile incidents related to electric scooters in India.
And look at that dates. Like
Yeah,
for the audience on screen,
yeah,
we're showing the dates of events. That's 25th, something's happened. 26th, something has happened.
yep,
28th, 29th. Every day, something has happened in that week. That's pretty crazy.
yep, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, the advice is buyer beware. Just, I guess, wait a little bit before you jump out and buy one of these new generation electric scooters. I tried looking
At least for the
into,
ones that are trying to, yeah, sorry, the ones that are trying to be the cheaper solution,
yeah.
stay away for now. And
So far,
off-brand
we haven't
things,
seen anything from Ather so as far as I know, and they've been in the
yeah,
space for a while, right?
yes, Aether has been doing
Yeah, Ather.
decently.
Sorry, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're. I don't think they've been even phased by the Ola release
Interesting,
because
interesting.
Aether was pure play. Like it was proper. Like we're building EVs as this big brand that's going to be taking over the space,
Hmm.
and the video evidence also proves that they also have some of the best performance out there.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
Well, what is the
and I've
price
seen a
differential
lot.
like between them?
I
Do you
think
know?
something I need to check.
Like while you look that up, I
Yeah.
also for the podcast in preparing for the podcast, I also tried to look up whether this is a thing in other EV scooter markets. So like I tried looking up any numbers if available for Europe, for example, because that's where you would probably see scooters starting to make a dent.
Yeah.
And China,
So the
yeah,
Aether,
yeah. Go ahead.
no, sorry, before you start on that, the Aether is slightly more expensive than the Ola scooter,
Only slightly.
but
Okay.
this, yeah, it's about 15% more expensive.
Okay. Okay. But
Yeah.
that can make the difference in terms of safety, right? Yeah.
That can make the difference in terms of
Yeah.
safety,
Yeah.
but that can also very crucially make the difference between a purchase decision because
Sure.
in percentages, that's
Sure.
15% more. But if you look at the actual cost of it, it's probably
Yeah.
a lakh and a half
I
a
see.
year. You're splitting hairs.
I see.
Splitting hairs, but again, for peace of mind, if you were looking to get a quick runabout for the city, which you can charge quickly and just have no more expenses, you're
Yeah.
trying to look at a cheaper solution, right? Because your overall
A-
spend is going to be,
And more
yeah.
crucially, like there are folks like delivery folks, right, who would be looking into things like this, given price
Once
rises and things like that. Yeah.
once charge stations become more predominant, that would be the case. But right now, I think only Bounce, the company
Uh-huh.
called Bounce,
Okay.
has been targeting that audience because they have, as part of their sales pitch, is swappable batteries.
I see.
Okay,
I see.
so you can even buy a scooter from them without a battery.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
you can directly get on a subscription plan to just go to their battery swapping stations and swap out whenever you need one. Or you can buy one with a battery and then also subscribe to it. So you can do all three versions of this.
Yeah. Speaking of electric vehicles that may come with things that are required to operate them or not, Tesla.
This was
Tes-
so crazy.
yeah, Tesla is planning to go the way of the Apple and not include the mobile charging kit with their with newer Teslas. And
This really annoys me.
so I've heard both sides of the argument for this, right? So, like, I've heard some
Okay.
arguments from Linus because Linus of Linus Media Group, in his podcast, made a huge furor about Apple doing this with cell phones. But in his opinion, apparently, well, let's hear your thoughts first before I move on to the
Right.
counterpoint. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you were going to talk about eco-friendly and shipping more units in the same space and all of that stuff. But see, this is a car. It's not a phone.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And this is crucially, I think a lot of the pushback has been in the same. I mean, just talking about the phone thing as well, which Apple, stopped, throwing in charging blocks with their phones. The same space is if you're selling something to the consumer and you're basically asking them to buy something else also to
Yeah.
make this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
then basically you're selling a defective product.
Okay.
If
Okay.
you look at it one way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you look at it the other way, if you look at the eco-friendly, people are only gonna business is always gonna say this is the eco-friendly thing to do
So, I
because
mean,
people already have 10.
that's just eco washing, as they say, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
some other
But what it
business
actually
decision that they can blame on being eco friendly and then trying to make a positive PR spin
exactly.
out of it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%.
But what happens here is massive savings for the company.
Oh yeah.
Massive.
Oh
And
yeah.
the scale of it is just pure math, right? So if you look at the Tesla charging cable or charging unit that they're
Hmm.
excluding going forward, it's starting at 275 and going to $400 a piece, right?
Mm.
And Elon Musk or Tesla as a group has said they're going to bring that 275 price point to 200 if you want to buy it, right?
Mm.
But we're not going to include it by default. It'll be an add-on, right?
Mm.
And given that Tesla sold 935,000 units in 2021 in terms of cars, right? So 900, so that's almost a million cars sold
Cars. Yeah.
in 2021, right? And that's already a 100% increase from the previous year, right?
Hmm.
So look at 935,000 times, let's say the base price of this charging
Yeah.
unit
Yeah.
is going to be 275.
Hmm.
That's $257 million a year they don't have to spend,
Yeah. 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 Oh, 100%. Right.
right?
It's the same
And
reason
not
why
to
Apple
add what the
got out
production.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure, they still have to manufacture some of these to sell them as accessories for
Hmm.
$200,
Hmm.
but the mass majority of people are probably just going to go to the charging station. That way, they don't need a home
Yeah.
kit or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
attachment that they're losing out on. So it's really a numbers game.
Yeah.
It's
It is.
a numbers game where it's about the money, right?
So
Where
the counterpoint that Linus had, if I remember correctly, was the fact that cell phones are different from cars in the sense that you don't take your cell phone outside and plug random chargers into it compared to cars. Now, so
yeah,
in EV sort of EV forward markets like the US in some sense, so at least some places in the US, not obviously not rural markets. A situation that happens with a lot of people, apparently, if they are working for nice enough companies, is that they don't park their car in a garage necessarily. They park their car on the street. They don't have charging infrastructure to begin with. When they charge is when
mm,
they go to work because they have charging stations at
mm,
work. That's
mm.
one. And then they use the supercharger network that Tesla has in the US. So Elon, in his tweet, again, Elon's tweets are the most unreliable tweets possibly on earth, right? Like this guy loves to troll people. He has tons of misinformation. He claims that the usage statistics of the mobile connector that's included with the Tesla were super low. But then, unless he provides actual numbers, we can't take that seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I can see how only people with houses now, if you were to consider, we talked about this, if you were to
yeah, yeah.
consider buying an EV in India, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you're living in a city where you're living in an apartment, it's
Yeah,
not feasible,
it's
right?
not.
And that's
It's
same,
not.
same, same. Yeah, it's the same thing, right? So it's the same thing where what you were talking about earlier
Yeah,
is if people are only using common charge points and
yeah.
not using their home chargers, then
Mm-hmm.
they don't really need it. So then it becomes a statistic, and then it becomes okay. It's something that's possibly can be excluded for people who don't need it.
Yep.
And for people who don't need it, that's okay. Fine, that's 275 bucks off the list price of the car.
Mm.
But 275 off of $85,000 car is stupid. Like to
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, we'll see. I mean, the demand for Teslas is high enough that I don't expect this to necessarily create a dent
yeah,
in their sales,
yeah.
nor
People
will,
people just ask for
yeah,
the accessory. Yeah.
if they need it. And then if Elon can
If
come
they
back
need
and
it, yeah.
if Elon can come back with numbers, obviously he won't. But if he can actually come back with numbers and say that, see, this made sense, maybe. But
Hmm.
otherwise, I don't know. All right. Speaking of which,
So
yeah, jumping
some
back
more
into India.
EVs.
Yes, exactly. So,
Yeah. So
um,
Kia and Hyundai, they're both
mm,
bringing their new EV babies to India. Not so much
nice.
babies in the Indian context, because these are going to be priced well over 45 lakhs, I'm sure.
Ooh,
Because these
that's
are premium cars to
eye-watering.
begin with.
Yes,
I mean,
interesting.
these are premium cars to begin with. I'm speculating pricing isn't out, but I'm thinking based on whatever else they have offered right now, and based
Mm,
on how much more premium EVs are right now compared to ICE engines. So
Mm,
it's going to be a very expensive purchase. But definitely, what they have going for them is the unique factor. So both the
mm,
EV6 that you're seeing on screen right now,
mm-hmm,
and also the Ionic 5 that
mm,
Hyundai has, both are like futuristic looking, really good looking cars.
mm.
So that's gonna set you apart if you're driving that around here.
Yeah.
So people might buy it just for that.
What's the competition in that pricing space
Nothing.
for EVs? Nothing.
Nothing.
Uh,
That's a big huge point over there. Is after like the Nexon and that,
mm.
which is around 15, 16, 17 lakhs. After that, you're basically going Audi. Like that's your
So
one
how
crore car.
e-tron? Okay. The only thing I can
E-tron,
think
yeah,
of, the only thing
or
I
a
can think
Q.
of that may come close is Mini Cooper Electric.
I don't think it's released in India,
I heard
but
that
again,
they took
different segment.
bookings. Yeah, no, absolutely, 100% different segment. Also more expensive, I believe, because it'll be closer to 50, maybe.
Hmm. Should be.
If I remember correctly, there was some chatter about EV taking
Hmm.
bookings for it and then it's selling out as well for India.
47 lakhs for Mini
Yeah,
Cooper
yeah.
SE.
So there you go. So that is the closest electric competition, and and it's of course the Mini is a lifestyle car, but it's a lifestyle car that
Hmm.
kind of makes sense in India if you think about it, just
Well, not at that place.
because of its footprint, and it's a quirky, show-offy kind of car.
But this is not that, right? So we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah,
Kia and
exactly.
the Hyundai.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to be family vehicles,
Family vehicles, people
which have
haulers. Yeah.
so many benefits. I don't know if you've
Oh
seen
yeah,
any of
yeah.
these
Oh,
reviews about
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
EV6. Like you could use it to power many things. Like
Mm,
it's great. Like what they're offering at that. Oh, well, yeah, depends. Again, we don't know the pricing yet, but I'm
yeah.
assuming it's easily over 40 lakhs.
Yeah, speaking of which, like, Maruti has been commenting that electric cars in India will be very difficult to price under 10 lakh rupees, right? So, like, below
True.
100K um, Indian rupees. And that makes sense, right?
I think
Batteries
that's
batteries
what's
are
holding them
expensive.
back from. That's what's
Yeah.
holding them back. Otherwise, they would have gotten into space. Or it's just an excuse. You could look at it anyway, right? So if you want
Yeah.
low range, because a lot of these tiny cars, they're not taken for long haul anyway. They're used as city
Mm,
commute.
yeah.
You don't need to focus too much on range. Even with 150
Mm.
kilometers of range, you should be fine to sell a
Who's
Swift or
the only
something.
person in that space is the Mahindra E Verito, right? Extremely cheap
Yeah, I mean
electric.
Mahindra has even Tigor also.
Okay, okay.
But that's also above 10 lakhs.
Okay,
Let's say.
interesting. I'm just also looking up the E Verito from Mahindra Electric, which you see on and off, especially in tier one cities, as being taxi vehicles.
Yes,
Yeah,
but those are
the
fleet taxi vehicles,
yeah.
fleet or taxi.
Mm,
Tigor, the Tigor Tata Tigor is starting at 1224.
okay, so yeah,
Yeah, so that's still above 10 lakhs.
yeah, and the E Verito apparently is 9.46. By the time you pay taxes and things like that, I'm sure it's going to be above 10. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And if anybody tries to create a full EV that's below 10 lakh or 100,000 rupees, you're going to see things like we are seeing
but
with the
not
EV scooter.
100,000. That's one. That's one lakh. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
10 lakhs.
Oh,
1 million. 1
1
million.
million. Yeah, before below 1 million. Yeah, exactly. So below 1 million rupees. Yeah, you're going to see things like what we saw with the EV scooters. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then finally, there's some news about um, one of the biggest two-wheeler companies in India, which is Hero, and their electric division, along with Bolt, uh, planning to set up 50,000 EV charging stations across India. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of players in the same space. You got
Okay.
Tata Power, NTPC, obviously these guys, and all these private companies who want to push the agenda. They need to invest in this space, and that's the only way this is going to work. Is if they make sure that their customers are supported with EV charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of charging stations, yesterday I was in Kochi, and they have the electricity board, KCB,
KCB, yeah.
who have
Yeah.
set up EV charging stations in every main district.
Yes.
Um, and yesterday, what I saw was it was roped out, so it was cordoned out with.
Ouch.
Everything seemed to be working, but then, like, how reliable is your experience going to be if you have an EV and you're relying on
Yeah.
that to charge? I mean,
There's
the
a
meters seem to be running. I
Yeah,
don't know
there's a
what was
private
wrong
EV.
exactly.
Yeah, there's a private EV charging station in Calicut at Highlight Mall, and I've seen a couple of Nexons charged there as well. So yeah, so here's my quote unquote not cynical take, but my conspiracy theory hat take on this. I think these charging stations will pop up wherever um, Swiggy and Zomato riders congregate.
Possible. Possible.
So the places where they wait with their vehicles, next to major food courts and malls, especially in tier 1 cities, that's where
Yeah.
you need to put those chargers. Yeah, the problem then would be just imagine like what that situation is going to be like later on, because it's like there are these folks, there'll be like fights over the charger and folks who have to run to pick up deliveries, and like it's going to be it is yeah,
I
we'll see
think
how
at that
things go.
point, battery swapping is probably better for delivery drivers,
But
not
again,
charging.
yeah, true. But the field battery swaps, yeah, it's going to be. We'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe Ola
Yeah.
will pull
Watch the
something.
space.
Watch the space. Exactly. Watch the space. All right. For today's podcast, we actually don't have too many gaming things to talk about. I know that Snoop Dogg commented about Call of Duty. So this
Yeah,
was.
he's going to be on the new season of Call of Duty.
Oh, I
don't know
see.
much.
Okay. I see. That's
Yeah.
interesting. There was a really hilarious thing about Snoop Dogg. There was a video of him complaining about, I believe, 2K.
Yeah.
The fact that he couldn't sign on to
Yeah,
2K. Yeah.
The NBA thing, right?
Yeah. And then he was
EA,
like,
get your servers up.
yeah.
Well, with more expletive.
Yeah, that, and then he was complaining. He was like, he also called out on Bill Gates as well. He was like, "Hey, Bill Gates, do something, fix it up." Yeah.
So
And-
Snoop Dogg is now a playable character in Call of Duty,
Oh wow. Okay.
Vanguard, and Warzone.
Oh wow. Okay. Sure. So that's one of those things, right? There's this intense competition between all of these free-to-play battle royale games. So Fortnite competes heavily with Warzone and PUBG. Fortnite was usually been the pathbreaker in terms of getting celebs on the platform or doing concerts on the
Yeah.
platform and things like that.
That was a Travis Scott concert, right? So in the metaverse.
Travis Scott, Deadmau5 has been doing his own type of metaverse concerts. Like he's been building his own sort of quote unquote virtual concerts in his own platform to do those kinds of things. But I think one of the most famous ones was Marshmello back in the day. He was one of the first people to do like a Fortnite concert. Speaking of which, Portal might have a version 3, but we'll have to
So the
wait and
creator
watch.
of that,
Yeah.
exactly, creator that wants to make something but hasn't got the buy-in yet, so they're expressing interest in making that.
Yeah. What's interesting is that there's a game that comes by default with every Steam Deck from Valve. It's kind of like the Astro Boy game that's on PS5. It's designed to kind of show off the hardware on the console and things like that. So the game that comes with the Steam Deck is actually set in the Portal universe. So it is quote unquote technically kind of a Portal game that's already available. And it's what they do is they kind of mimic like a workbench in like a Portal like factory where your controls look like the Steam Deck controls. So it's kind of a way to teach you how to use the Steam Deck controls. Yeah.
Yeah.
I lose the name like of what it's called. Oh, it's called Aperture Desk Job, and the game's bundled for free with the the Steam Deck,
Mm.
but it's actually available for free. I don't know if it's available for free. It's available for anybody. Anybody
On
can actually,
Steam?
yeah, on Steam.
On PC. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can play it without the
Steam Deck.
without the Steam Deck, but as you can see, like all of the controls are kind of mapped. If you see the
To
for the
that
folks
same,
on
yeah.
for the folks seeing it on the video podcast, like the controls actually mimic the controls of the Steam Deck, so they kind of try to train you to get that muscle memory of where different buttons and things are on the Steam Deck.
Interesting.
And finally, a combination that we never thought nobody ever asked for, which is games and blockchains and NFTs. And
See, NFTs and games we talked about. We just talked about
Yes.
skinning and having,
Yes.
unique things that again
unique
what is
unique
this
unlockables
exactly
that are
is?
tradable, right? And non-copyable. Yeah. Which eventually somebody will hack and provide to gamers for free. But yeah, it's like whatever. Yeah, a bunch of different studios, including Square Enix, I believe Ubisoft also back in the day, they were all talking about integrating NFT based items and goodies into their games. Like paid DLC and skinning in games has already been like a scourge that most at least gamers of our vintage don't like.
Yeah.
But NFTs seem to be taking it to the next level. And I don't know, man. Like, I think this is more about, like, the one way I see this becoming a big thing is like game companies can hype the NFTs and then kind of provide it for free to streamer influencers,
Yeah.
right? And because I'm going by the assumption that an NFT is worth something because of its hype or whatever, right? So in that case, it'll
Yeah.
be available to sort of like that elite class of gamers who make money playing games, for which
Yeah.
that it kind of makes sense for them to invest in sort of these some of these game NFTs, like streamers, for example, would be a big example of this. But how this will affect the general gaming public in any positive manner, I fail to see. Right, it's you're going to start introducing speculation on virtual in-game assets, and maybe there'll be an initial run on in-game assets, because games go hand in hand with collector culture quite heavily. Physical collection of games is a big thing, especially in economies like the US, right? Like there are collector's versions of NES games that have gone for millions of dollars. The original NES cartridges of rare games and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's the main thing I think that they're trying to hit with this. When you go to an all digital version of the game, the collectible aspect and the speculation aspect is lost because it's an infinitely reproducible.
And that's the same thing with NFTs, right? So we're talking about NFT art. The
Yep.
whole point of art being singular is that you get to own it, you get to enjoy it, and that's it, right? And you can show it off, right? But with NFTs or virtual or digital art, it's like you own it, sure, but then everybody else gets to see and enjoy it the same way. Exactly.
Yep.
There's no
Yep.
difference.
Now, if I really want to put my tinfoil hat on, the worst way that this could manifest itself is in gaming companies releasing a limited number of copies of a game. Okay? Like, say, 1 million copies of a game. And you're only allowed to play the game if you own the game on the blockchain. So the idea is you can sell you can't sell digital games right now, right? So the idea is you could now resell digital games now that you owned it. You can resell them and you open a secondary market for digital games.
Well, you don't need to do all of that. I mean, technically, you can sell a text document on NFT, or you can have a text NFT, right? Which is basically you can go back to the olden days of serial keys, or even now people use serial keys.
Yeah,
you
but
can sell the serial key as an NFT, You can download.
No, sure, but this is a way for them to artificially limit the supply and then have a speculative game going on and things like that, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible. This is obviously the most blatantly anti-consumer thing that you can think of. The other problem with digital games is that it's horrible for preservation. So folks who had the original DS or the original Wii, if they bought games on the eShop, both eShops have closed or are closing soon. I'm not sure which is what, but basically, if you bought all those digital games, tough luck to you. If you format your Wii or if you buy a Wii off the secondary market and if you try to log into your Wii account, none of the games you paid for will be available for you to play for anymore because the shop's closed. It's like, what do you do? Then best of luck keeping that hard drive alive for however long.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with digital games as well. I know a lot of people, like we spoke about this. A lot of people still prefer buying the disc version of PlayStation games or Xbox games because they feel like they have the control and they have the resellability as well. That's
resellability and then the collectability. So that's why I was saying like that's my tinfoil hat assessment is like that's how you can create a collector's market of video games and then try to say which is not good, at least in my opinion. All right. And with that, that's the end of episode 4.
This week's
this week's Tech Cynics podcast. And if you like the podcast, please tell your friends, introduce them to us, and please comment, like, share, and subscribe to our podcast on multiple podcast platforms. We'd love it if you could get the word out on some of our tech musics and rants. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I know we've been getting some traction. But I think two of our audience members, we got a shout out to them, have been commenting on our YouTube videos. So Fazil, thank you very much, and Debmon as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for following us and engaging with us on the YouTube channel.
For sure, absolutely. All right, until next time. Bye-bye.
All right.